Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Betting Life Show brought to you by Fantasy Life. I'm Matthew Freedman, Matt LaMarca. The NBA Conference Finals are set. We have the Timberwolves and the Mavericks and the Celtics and the Pacers. And here with me to break down the Conference Finals series is Matt LaMarca. LaMarca, it's been, I think, about a month since we talked about basketball. I feel like a lot has changed, and yet, like, some things haven't changed. The Celtics, right where we thought they would be. Everyone else, though, it's I wouldn't say like a total surprise that these are the matchups we have, but at least somewhat surprising.
Yeah, I'm pretty surprised, to be honest. I did not have the Timberwolves and Mavericks as conference finals teams. I certainly did not have the Pacers as a conference finals team. And, definitely some things broke favorably for Indiana to be able to make it this far. But I think in the West, the Timberwolves have proven that they're for real, and so has Dallas, right? I mean, Dallas has had to run through two teams that are loaded with, NBA champions and NBA MVPs, and they've been up to the task. So, I think personally we are in for a really good series in the West, I'm excited to see which one of those teams can make the leap to the finals.
All right, well, let's start with the Western Conference. And what we'll do a breakdown of each team, strengths, weaknesses, look at how the teams match up, and then you'll talk about how you might think about approaching the series from the betting perspective, whether you're kind of going game by game, if you have some preliminary game one thoughts, if you're looking to bet a specific angle on the series or, player props throughout the series, anything like that. So let's start with the Western Conference. And let's start with the Timberwolves. Give me, your thoughts on strengths and weaknesses. I'll just say, setting this up, I am amazed at how resilient the Timberwolves are and just how physical they are. And I guess that shouldn't be a surprise given who they have on their team. Rudy Gobert, Naz Reid. But I feel like you just even see like mental toughness in a lot of these other players here. So tell me what you're seeing with the Timberwolves' strengths and weaknesses.
Yeah, I think, obviously it starts with Anthony Edwards. He has kind of taken the mantle of like this generation's Kobe Bryant, Michael Jordan type of player. And I'm not saying he's those guys yet, by the way. But in terms of his competitiveness, his will to win, he's got all of those traits that you look for. The guy is a dog. The fact that he is this good this early, I think speaks incredibly well for Minnesota's future moving forward. So Anthony Edwards clearly is strength number one. I also think that they have the best group of big men in the league. You mentioned Gobert, Naz Reid, Karl Anthony Towns. Those three guys are all incredibly talented players. I mean, you've got the defensive player of the year in there. You've got the reigning sixth man of the year in there. And you have Towns, who is arguably the greatest shooting big man who has ever played this game. Like, that is a lot of talent for a trio of guys who are 7 feet tall. And then, of course, maybe this team's biggest strength is their defense. They are a rabid bunch of dogs on the defensive side of the ball. They are relentless. They pressure you at every opportunity. They're incredible defensively. They were the number one team in defense during the regular season. We have seen that carry over to the playoffs. It's the reason why they are able to, do what they did in Game 7 and overcome a 20-point second half deficit, right? They held the Nuggets to 14 points in the third quarter. And that defense is going to make them a very tough out for whoever they are going to play moving forward.
Yeah, the defense is really strong. And, Mike Conley as a veteran point guard playing off of, Anthony Edwards. And what was so amazing about Game 7 was that Edwards had a bad game, offensively, a bad game. But in the second half, he played good defense. He contributed in other ways. And the Timberwolves found a way to come back and win pretty convincingly a game that they were losing by, 20 points?
Yep.
At one point. with Anthony Edwards not playing anywhere close to his peak form. Like that is scary for me as a Mavericks fan to think about. I would say if there's a drawback to this team, it's that even though they're so incredibly strong defensively, it feels like offensively, if Anthony Edwards isn't playing his best, this team could struggle to put up points. But you're kind of nitpicking.
No, I agree. I think that is the clear weakness for this team. If Edwards is getting shut down, I'm not sure who the second guy is, right? It's supposed to be Karl Anthony Towns, but he wasn't really that effective, or he hasn't been so far through the postseason. He averaged, less than 20 points per game in each of their first two series. So if the Mavericks can limit Anthony Edwards, and that is going to be significantly easier said than done, I'm not sure that the Timberwolves have enough offensive firepower to make up for it, right? If you look at offensive rating, they were 17th in the league during the regular season. So this is very much a team that needs these games to be on the lower scoring side. If the Mavericks can turn this into a track meet, that I think would be their best chance of winning this series.
All right, well, let's talk about the Mavericks. Now, I will say I am a Mavericks fan. Obviously, I'm not going to look at this objectively, but I do think, okay, so the Thunder, they were obviously super athletic. I'm surprised that the Mavs were able to hang with them from like the athleticism perspective. The Mavs are not going to be as physical as the Timberwolves, but the Mavs, I think, have actually been, at least for me, like surprisingly physical in the postseason. With Luka, you have, I would say, I feel like I don't even need to say probably. With Luka, you have the best player in this matchup. And then with Kyrie, he's a top 3 player in this matchup. So you have that going for you. I just don't know if the Mavericks have enough outside of that. You can't count on PJ Washington and Derek Jones to continue to be lights out in a playoff series. Like, it's awesome if they can do that, but you can't count on that. And without those guys performing the way they did last series, the Mavericks wouldn't have won. So I'm just still a little bit uncertain about this Mavericks team, even though they do have the best player in this series. What are your thoughts on the Mavericks in terms of strengths and weaknesses?
Yeah, I mean, you pretty much hit the nail right on the head. I think that the strength of this Mavericks team is that they have the best 1-2 offensive punch, probably of all teams remaining in the playoffs, right? I mean, Luka Doncic, you can make a pretty easy argument that he is the best offensive player in the NBA. He's that good. Now, is he playing at 100%? That's sort of the big question right now. He was definitely limited at times in that Thunder series, but he played well enough, I think, in the latter half that I wouldn't downgrade him too much. I think he is pretty much going to be Luka Doncic. And if he is not up to the task, you have Kyrie Irving, who is, an incredibly gifted offensive player in his own right. So those two guys should be able to overcome this tough Timberwolves defense. The big question is, where is the rest of the production coming from? Because I'm with you. What PJ Washington did, particularly in the first 2 games of that series, or the first 3 games versus the Thunder, was humongous. And I'm just not sure that he has that kind of performance in him again. Derek Jones Jr. also has been great. So where is the offense coming from? They're going to need an unexpected contributor in this series. Those two guys, or, potentially Derek Lively, Daniel Gafford at the center position. Those guys are going to have to be huge on the glass. And anything that they can get offensively from them, I think, is just going to be a bonus. So, yeah, I like this Dallas team. I do think that they are kind of being slept on a little bit, right? There were a lot of people yesterday who said that Game 7 of the Nuggets Timberwolves series was essentially Game 7 of the Western Conference Finals. I am not of that belief. I think Dallas is a live dog here, but they're going to need Luka and Kyrie to carry a lot of the weight.
All right. So how do you see these two teams matching up?
Well, as much as I just said that I think this is a good, that the Mavericks are a live dog, on paper, this is a really not a good matchup for them, right? I mean, the Timberwolves are one of the few teams that can match the Mavericks on the perimeter defensively. Anthony Edwards can guard Luka Doncic. I mean, nobody can truly guard Luka, but he can do a great job. Mike Conley can guard Kyrie Irving. They have other bodies to throw into the mix if need be. Nickeil Alexander-Walker is a great defender. Jaden McDaniels is a great perimeter defender. So they have a lot of bodies to throw at the Mavs on the perimeter. And their defense is at their best when Rudy Gobert is allowed to kind of be stationary in the middle, and he doesn't have to work too hard as an on-ball defender. And with the Mavs, that's exactly what he's going to be able to do. He's going to be able to guard Gafford or Derek Lively and just kind of roam the middle like a free safety and just gobble up anything that comes into the lane. So, as much as I want this to be a series, and I think that the Mavericks are being undervalued, I have to admit that it's a pretty poor matchup for them on paper.
Yeah, I originally was thinking, I just don't want them to have to play the Nuggets. And then I started thinking about it more. I was like, you know what? This is not a good matchup for the Mavericks with the Timberwolves. I don't know if the Mavericks have defensively the backbone to be able to stop both Anthony Edwards and Karl Anthony Towns. So that's the defense. And then on the offense, I don't know if they have enough to be able to get through the gauntlet that is the Timberwolves defense. So I don't know. I feel like if this series ends in 5 games, it's the Timberwolves winning. If the series ends in 7 games, that is how the Mavericks have a chance to win. But like, I don't think this is going to be a situation where the Mavericks just cut through the Timberwolves defense. Like if the Mavericks win, it's going to be a grind.
Yeah, as good as the Mavericks are offensively, like, we just saw them give an elite offensive team all sorts of trouble, right? Jamal Murray, there were times where he was invisible against this Timberwolves defense. And again, Jamal Murray might be a little bit banged up, so maybe it's not the fairest example to use, but yes, the Timberwolves defense is that good. They are for real. The one thing I will say is that Dallas has done a tremendous job of improving their defense over the second half of the season and into the playoffs. They're 6th in defensive rating out of the 16 playoff teams. That's pretty good. I mean, it's not elite by any stretch, but it's way better than you would have expected with how they played defense in the first half of the season. So, I think PJ Washington and Gafford have sort of helped solidify them on that end. And they're going to need to play a little bit of defense in this series because, yeah, I think it's going to be a grind. I do not think this is a series where, it's going to be 120 to 110 type of final scores. This is going to be a slugfest.
All right. So with that in mind, how are you approaching this from the betting perspective?
So I thought about the Mavericks on the series spread, plus 1.5 games, but that's minus 150. And I think if Dallas can get this to game 7, they'll have a chance to just win the series outright. So I think you could potentially play Dallas. They're roughly plus 145, plus 150 to win the series. I also kind of like the total games prop here. Over 5.5 total games is minus 160. I think the Mavericks can win 2 here, right? Like, that's essentially what we need to happen is you need the Mavericks to win at least 2 games. I think if the odds of Dallas winning this game in 5 series or less feel like slim to none, and I'm leaning more towards none.
Yeah.
So if Dallas can win 2 games, I do think that this should be a long series. I think 6 or 7 are the 2 most likely outcomes in my eyes. So over 5.5 at -160. Obviously, there's a little bit of juice that you're going to have to pay there, but it's not terrible as far as series prices goes. And some of these to go over 5.5 games, you're talking, well over -200. So -160 to me feels just a smidge disrespectful to how good this Mavericks team is.
All right. So let's move on to the Eastern Conference Finals, and let's start with the Celtics. I mean, it feels like it has been an inevitability that they would get at least to this point, given how strong they were in the regular season, and then the path that they had in the postseason to get here. LaMarca, what do you think about the Celtics, their strengths and weaknesses?
Yeah. So the Celtics have had an incredibly easy walk up until this point, right? They got to play the Heat basically without Jimmy Butler in the first round. Then they got to play the Cavs in round 2, where Donovan Mitchell didn't play near the end of the series. So there are definitely a lot of people who are going to look at that and say, this team hasn't proven anything. Why should I respect the Celtics? Especially given, some of their playoff struggles in recent years. But I am here to say that would be a mistake. I have been significantly high on this team all year, and they've made me a bunch of money in this playoffs so far. So I've been on the Celtics -2.5 in the first 2 series that they played. Spoiler alert, I think I'm going right back to the well. But as far as strength, this team is just oozing with strengths. They have the best starting 5 in basketball. They were number 1 in offensive efficiency during the regular season, number 2 in defensive efficiency, first in net rating by a wide margin. They have 3 guys in this series who I think can give you the potential for 30-point games. Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, and Derek White have all been extremely hot during the postseason. And just their ability to play both sides of the ball makes them the best team, in my opinion. As far as weaknesses go, the Kristaps Porzingis injury definitely lowers their ceiling. The most recent report is he is going to miss the first 2 games of this series. Whether or not he will be back after that remains to be seen. But without Porzingis, their lineup definitely sees a little bit of a ding. Is that enough to matter in this specific series? I don't think so, but it is something to keep in mind. And then number 2 is their offense is just so heavily 3-point based that on a night where they have cold shooting performances, it does let their opponent hang around and win games potentially. We saw that in each of the first 2 rounds, right? They had a dreadful shooting night against Cleveland, and it allowed the Cavs to steal game 2. And they dropped the game against Miami in round 1 as well. So if you're looking for a weakness with the Celtics, I think that is it. But you really kind of have to dig deep. I don't see a ton of obvious flaws with this team.
All right. Celtics, by the way, -1,200 or thereabouts to win the series. What are your thoughts with the Pacers' strengths and weaknesses?
Pacers can score the ball with anybody. They are an outstanding offensive team. They were number 2 in offensive efficiency during the regular season, and they just set a record by shooting the highest percentage in any playoff game over the past 25 plus years. And they did it in a game 7 against a solid New York Knicks team in a extremely hostile environment, right? Madison Square Garden is not an easy place to play. And the Pacers came in there and made it look like it was just some random Saturday or Sunday afternoon in January. They were carefree, and it was really just a very impressive performance. But after that, it gets tough to find things to truly love about this Pacers team. I mean, their depth is great. That's another strength. They are one of the few teams in the postseason that are still playing their reserves, comfortable minutes. And guys like TJ McConnell, Isaiah Jackson, guys like that off the bench were vital for them in that Knicks series. But I don't think that that's necessarily going to help them much against the Celtics. Defensively is a weakness. They are not a great defensive team. We saw that at times against the Knicks. So they're going to, sort of the opposite of what I said about the last series. If the Pacers are going to be competitive here, they need these games to be, in the 120s. That is their path to victory. Because if they get into a slower type of series with the Celtics, Boston's dominance is just going to be asserted.
Let me ask you a question about coaches, because for NBA, I think coaching almost doesn't matter, which is going to sound, like super nice, but it's like, do you have the best players on the court? Like, a sport like NBA, I just think like talent tends to reign, but you have two coaches here, Joe Mazzulla. I live in the Northeast. The opinion of people here on Mazzulla is maybe like to be determined, but I would say maybe like skewing towards negative at the moment. Of course, like you win a championship and then people will love you. Rick Carlisle, I'm probably a little bit biased on this because, he won a championship for the Mavericks, but like he seems to be like a high floor type of coach. I don't know if like he has the ceiling for the Pacers to help them navigate this series to get a win. I also don't know if it matters because I think the Pacers are just totally outflanked when it comes to talent. But how do you see the matchup between Rick Carlisle and Mazzulla?
It's like such a minimal part of my handicapping process. Yeah. Like I said, I think you're spot on about the coaches. I think Rick Carlisle is a fantastic coach, but I don't think, unless he's going to give them 25 minutes a game in this series and hop into a time machine, I'm not sure how much he's actually going to matter. I think if you look at the Celtics coaching, like just their last couple of hires, they had Brad Stevens, who was considered, one of the best coaches, if not the best coach in the league. And they were, when he left, it was, how are we going to replace him? And then Ime Udoka came in and everything was absolutely fine. And then you had Ime Udoka leave and it was, oh, well, how are we going to replace him now? And Joe Mazzulla came in and they've been the best team in basketball for the past 2 years. So like, to me, the coaching stuff doesn't particularly matter all that much. It is great. You want a guy who can get you a bucket on a drawn up play after a timeout. Like that kind of stuff matters. But overall, it's the Jimmies and the Joes, not the X's and the O's.
Yeah, it feels like if somehow the Pacers do win, obviously like Mazzulla is going to catch a ton of heat, but it feels like if the Pacers win, at some point it would have been, the Pacers got this one particular win, in a like key game 3. They got this win because Rick Carlisle outcoached Joe Mazzulla. Like Carlisle came up with something offensively, whatever it was, and Mazzulla couldn't figure out quickly enough how to counter it. So that is the reason why I ask. I don't think we're going to see a scenario like that, but if it falls that way, where the Celtics actually lose, I think Mazzulla and Carlisle will have a pretty big hand in it. All right, the matching up. How do you see the Celtics and the Pacers actually matching up?
Yeah, so I think it's a pretty bad matchup for the Pacers, right? The teams that we have seen give the Celtics trouble in years past have been the, grind you down, punch you in the mouth, physical types of basketball teams. The Pacers are the exact opposite of that. And that's not to say that they're, not a tough team, but they are essentially going to try to beat the Celtics at their own game. They want to shoot threes. They want to play fast. They want to score the basketball. And I just can't see that happening, right? Like the Celtics were slightly better than the Pacers in terms of offensive efficiency in the regular season. These were the top 2 teams in the league. but they were just significantly better on the defensive side. So they're going to have to really get, I think, very fortunate to extend this series to 6 or 7 games. It's just a really bad matchup for them. Boston can score the ball with them, like the Knicks really were not equipped to do. But they're just so much better on the other side of the ball as well.
Yeah, the matchup of Tyrese Halliburton versus Drew Holiday, I think, is really tough, really unfortunate for the Pacers, because if they are to win, they need Halliburton 4 games in this series absolutely to take over, like to go like God mode and get like 40 points. And I don't think that's very likely against Drew Holiday.
And the Pascal Siakam matchup is going to be a lot harder than it was last series too. Siakam was great for the Pacers against the Knicks, but he had a smaller guy defending him basically all series. What makes the Celtics so good is that Jason Tatum is yes, he is an elite offensive player, but he is a fantastic defensive player as well. So I would imagine that he'll see a lot of Siakam in this series, and he's going to do a much more effective job than the Knicks guys did.
All right. So that's the matchup. In terms of betting this, you've already talked about this a little bit. You're thinking about Celtics minus 2.5 for the series spread. Anything else catch your eye for the various markets here?
Yeah, I'll take just the Celtics in game 1, minus 9.5, minus 10. Already the better team, and then you're going to give them a pretty significant rest advantage. The Pacers are coming off of a game 7 on Sunday. Now they have to play on Tuesday. It wasn't a game 7 in the fact that like the Pacers were fighting down to the wire tooth and nail, but they still had to exert a lot of energy, both physically and mentally, just a couple of days ago, and now they have to turn the page pretty quickly. So I think the Celtics will have a pretty significant edge here in game 1. As far as other things that I'm looking at in the series, I kind of like Derek White, most 3-pointers made at plus 175. Derek White has shot the heck out of the ball in this postseason. He's had a lot of games with 10 plus attempts. So I think he is going to be very live here in this market. Tyrese Halliburton is the favorite. I would not consider him like an elite 3-point shooter. He got hot at times versus the Knicks, but I think that, like you mentioned, with Drew Holiday sort of applying the pressure to him defensively, I think he is overpriced at minus 120. So I would be looking at some of these other options. White is the obvious candidate at plus 175, but you can go a little bit further down the board too. I think maybe Tatum has some value at plus 700. So I do think that there is some value in this market here.
Okay. I like that. Fading Halliburton on the threes and going with Derek White. Let me see here. All right. Out of the various bets that you've talked about, both Western and Eastern Conference series, what is your favorite bet right now?
I'm going to go over 5.5 games in the Western Conference Finals at minus 160. I think that this is going to be a more competitive series than I think most people do. I think Dallas, when you take a team or 2 guys like Kyrie Irving and Luka Doncic, both with just oodles of playoff and big game experience, I do not think that they are going to be an easy out. The Timberwolves are the better team, and they do match up pretty well against Dallas, but I think Dallas should be able to get the 2 games that they need to push this to 6. And it wouldn't shock me if it went to 7. So over 5.5 games, minus 160. That's my favorite bet.
Yeah. Even as a Mavericks fan who, doesn't like this matchup for the Mavericks, I do think it would be not an upset, but like pretty disappointing
Yep.
with Doncic and Irving, you can't get to at least 6 games.
Yep.
So, yeah, I do see the virtue in that bet, and I hope you are correct there. All right. That is going to do it for this episode of the Betting Life Show, brought to you by Fantasy Life. Please subscribe to the show as well as the newsletter. Tell your degenerate betting friends. Join the Discord. See all of our bets in the free Fantasy Life Bet Tracker, and follow us on social media at Matt LaMarca and MattFtheOracle. Thank you, and see you again next episode.